But we didn't.
Here, turn the live. Cleaning house.
It's like a discussion. We didn't know exactly what.
You wanted to
Yeah, and I'm bringing the front.
Oh, great.
This one.
I was making a note of it. Oh, if he says, she won't, I I don't know that there's.
No, they're just little, they're really small, just a bunch of little custard bangers. And one of the things you run over there, yeah, it's really cool. And the t-shirt actually comes out. Yeah, well, that's just, that's
Yeah, they do, it just changed so much, so quickly. I don't remember the name, but not actually. Ted.
That's Aisha, friend of Shannon's. That's
Yeah.
Works out for them.
Yeah, worked good. Yeah. They were like here in the beginning. Early days.
Before there was a series.
Right here?
Yeah, he predates them.
No, I don't know about
Before we were doing residential.
Oh, predates city. Predates I've seen a lot happen just like it comes through this. I think I just went through here.
Yeah, Fred, Steven, could you get the, you need to do that, right?
I don't actually know how to do that. Okay, you're welcome to do our best.
What are you doing?
Sorry. Did you notice that these floors are the same as up in Lowell?
I didn't.
You know, they're same width plank and they're ash, same exact floor.
Very impressive.
It's kind of not that common of a wood, that's why I noticed it
Oh, I see.
for flooring.
Is that right? Ash is a nice wood.
It is, I love ash, yep.
Everybody loves ash.
Yeah.
Can't help it.
I don't know. Carolyn and I have, the entire house is done in sandwood, plank, and ash also.
Oh, great. How are we doing?
Oh, I'm just getting an audio recorder going.
Okay.
Apologies for the disturbance.
Well, welcome and thank you for coming to the Sunday Sit. This event is put on by the residents of the Monastic Academy as part of the Center for Mindful Learning. It's really nice to see all of you here this Sunday. During this event, feel free to use the bathroom whenever you need to or stand up if you feel the need as well. And enjoy the talk put on by our teacher, Soryu. Thanks for being here.
We have been moving through the 5 primary words in the name of this community. The first word is community. The second is experience, community for the experience and development of awakening and responsibility. Each of these words has a specific meaning, and they come together in English to make a nice acronym, CEDAR, which is one of my favorite trees. We've spent the past 2 months talking about what each of those letters means, and we've come to the last letter, responsibility. For me, when I started this path, it was fundamentally in order to fulfill responsibility. My main interest was in finding out how I could live in order to benefit the world. I didn't know how to do that, and to be blunt, as a, how shall we say, arrogant 18-year-old, but you know, arrogant 18-year-olds are wise. I didn't know anyone who knew how to live their truest responsibility. Didn't see anyone who I could deeply believe in that way. Certainly not myself. And so that was the primary motivation in entering this path. And right now we are running the Monastic Academy in Lowell, and most of the people who come there also are interested in finding out how to live in what we call a responsible way. A responsible way means that you're ethical and that you're effective. So how do you make a difference? How do you make a positive difference in the world? Many people come with that question. It's a question which I suppose and I hope everyone in this room has struggled with. It's a question that holds us accountable. It's a basic challenge for us to discover how to answer that question. How is it possible to live out our deepest responsibility in life? In terms of Buddhism, we have a word for this. We call it our vow. How do you find and realize your vow? Your deepest commitment, your deepest dedication in having been born. That is necessary to fully express before you die. How do we find this? To me, asking that question, finding the answer, is fundamental to this path. And that's why we have it there at the end, at the climax of the name, CEDAR. How do we make a positive difference? I'd say that the most important thing to know, the most important thing that I have seen over the decades of monastic and other sorts of training that I've done is that this isn't an answer that you just come to because you hope for it. It's not an answer that you find because you're tired of searching. It's something that you find through constant struggle and sacrifice. Something that you test with your life decisions, with the real decisions that you really make that really impact real people. Not just with our convictions that we can so eloquently profess, but with real gritty decisions that we make that have an impact, that may make us uncomfortable, that may make us even more exhausted. Those are the moments when we're tested, and those are the moments when we discover how deeply we believe in the vow that we have found. In our particular culture, these teachings have to change according to the culture that they're in. And in our particular culture, there are three what do you call it? Decoys. Three primary decoys. This is something that the Buddha actually talked about quite a bit. He said that if the hunter sets out decoys for the deer or for the waterfowl, does he do so for their benefit or not? The answer is no, he doesn't. He does so for their ruin. And in the same way, we have in our culture, there are certain decoys that are set out for us in which we believe. And because we believe in them, we don't find our vow. Because we believe in them, we turn away from our responsibility. Despite the fact that in that very moment, we believe that we are virtuous and strong and caring and mature. So I'll be interested to see what you think about these three decoys. Because as I say, in all likelihood, we've struggled with these and we have come to believe in them. So the first is called listen to yourself. We say that to each other all the time, and we say it to ourselves. Have to listen to myself. This is a big decision. I really have to listen to myself. I have to pay attention to what I most truly believe. I have to listen to the voice in my head and do what it says, because I have to listen to myself, because this is the true way. The next is be true to your dream. You have a dream, don't you? Well, be true to it. Don't turn away from it. You have to achieve it. You have to accomplish it in this lifetime. Don't you have a dream? Don't you have a vision for your future, for your life? Well, complete it. Even if that means turning away from certain values or turning away from certain friendships. It's your duty. It's your responsibility to be true to your dream. And then finally, and I'd say for us most deeply, we have come to hold on to the idea that the way we're going to live our vow The way we're going to fulfill our responsibility in this life is if we follow our hearts. And you hear people say this, follow your heart. You can believe in that, don't you understand? Your deepest emotions, your intuitions. Follow that. That's the highest authority in the universe. How you feel is the highest authority in the world. And even if how you feel causes you to do things that hurt other people, hurt yourself, destroy life on this planet, nonetheless, all of those things are fundamentally present in order to help you feel better. That's why we exist, you know, so that you can feel better. That's given to us. This is a doctrine. Every culture has its religion, has its dominant religion. Our dominant religion is called humanism. That means that we think that the human experience is at the center of the universe. Man is the measure of all things, as we say, as has been said for thousands of years now. And I'd say that we've now reached the logical extreme, logical conclusion of that philosophy. Each of these three decoys is confusing because it isn't that it's wrong. It's not that any of these three are just wrong. There are times, of course, when you should follow your heart, when you should be true to your dreams, when you should listen to yourself. Of course, such times exist. The issue isn't these are incorrect statements. The issue is that if you take these as some kind of absolute authority, then you are setting yourself up to cause enormous suffering. It's the grabbing onto them as an absolute authority, as an unquestionable authority. And the time when we know whether we have taken them as absolute authorities is not while we're comfortably philosophizing about our futures. It's at the moment that we have to make a difficult decision that actually impacts people, that actually impacts our future, that impacts those we love. At that moment when it really matters, we find out what we really believe. What do we really believe in? And for us in our culture, we typically believe in those three things, despite the fact that it's relatively obvious. If you consider for just a moment, it's relatively obvious that all three of these, if we take them as some kind of absolute authority, are selfish. Each of them is a kind of knowledge which comes from ourselves, which cannot be disproven by any other authority, because I am the only one who can possibly know if I know, and which can't be effectively questioned in the future, because the person who will question it, the person who has the authority to question it, is a person who was created by it. Which is to say that when you make a decision, the decision isn't just an act, the decision is a creative act, which creates your future, and in creating your future creates the you of your future. Every decision we make creates us from then on. And the person, therefore, who's the only person who has the authority to look back on and question the decisions that we've made, is the person who was created by those decisions. And in that way, we're lost. We don't have any moral grounding. because of the fundamentally self-centered conviction that if I follow my dream and my heart and the voice in my head, that is the right decision. That's how I make a good life. And so I can say that if we want to find our vow, if we want to live in a truly responsible way, it's essential for us, not so much by getting rid of the ability to listen to the voice in our head and the image in our mind and the feeling in our body, not by throwing that away, but by coming to experience those things fully enough to see their limitations. By doing that, by taking them as far as they go and acknowledging that there's a limit to how far they go, by doing that, we are able to go beyond them. And we're able to find something else, something beyond them. And there's a word for this. And I'll tell you the word, but I don't care too much about the word. The word isn't the point. And so the rest of the talk is going to be about how you find the meaning of this word. But I'll tell you the word. The word is friendship. And it's the word that we started with in this lecture series. Community is about friendship, and responsibility is about friendship. It's about valuing friendship above selfishness. That's how this is done. We come to the point when we actually value friendship above our personal preferences and assumptions. To come to that point is, well, you did it. If you get to that point, then you succeeded at achieving the purpose of a human life. If you get there, and let's face it, not a lot of people do. If you get there, you did it. Congratulations. If you can get there. Once again, it's not something that happens just because we wish for it or because we're tired of it not having happened yet. It happens because of work and sacrifice. But it is possible to work and sacrifice enough to get to that point, and then that has been a successful human life. So how do we get there? Well, you get there, again, and to put it alternatively, you get there by learning how to be simultaneously honest and kind. Again, if you're a person who can be simultaneously honest and kind, you did it. That's it. You have achieved superhuman status. You've transcended the human being. You used your human life to go beyond what is human. And now you're whatever you want to be called, a saint, a Buddha, a Christ, whatever you want to, whatever people choose to call you, it's accurate. People will say, look, a Buddha has appeared in the world, and they won't be wrong. So how do you do that? How do you achieve those two skills of honesty and kindness so that it's possible for us to be true friends to each other? How is that actually done? How is it actually done? This is a big question, and there is a big answer. Right now, I'm just going to give the first part of the answer, and I can give it to you from the best of my knowledge and experience. As far as I can tell, the single most important thing you can do to discover how to be honest and kind, to discover how to be a friend, to discover your vow, to discover how to live in a truly responsible way, is keep your word. And this is hard. If you say you're going to do something, do it. The ability to do that day in and day out is very rare. We readily see this in each other. We don't as readily see it in ourselves. But it's true. It's rare. It's unusual. It's difficult. And one of the reasons that I'm so grateful for our community, the community of residents at the monastic academy, a group of people who live together, is that in that environment, you can really look at how common it is for us to say we'll do something that we don't do. And this can happen on the big level of this is my conviction, I believe in such and such, and then you live with them and you see, well, that's well put. You said it skillfully, but your life doesn't represent that. And you can actually call people on that. And it happens in small things like, yes, I'll finish that task by Wednesday, and then it's Thursday, and you ask, did you finish the test? And they say, no, didn't do it. I'm working on it. I don't even know if we should really have finished it by Wednesday. You see it again and again. And you see the various, Shinzen yesterday at the retreat that he was doing was talking about that you need a clear ethical code, and then you can't be mealy-mouthed about it. You can't sort of say, well, that's what we should do, but we don't need to do it under these circumstances, which then multiply. One of them is that we commit every day to strive to live without lying. And we say that every day, 3 times. And yet, again and again, we see it happen. We see it happen again and again, that we say we'll do something and we don't do it, that we lie and cause damage, hurt people because of it. And then mysteriously feel confused and frustrated when people don't trust us anymore. Get actually angry at people for not trusting us anymore. Because we're in that tight-knit community, we are able to call each other on it and push each other. If we're not in such a tightly knit community, then it's harder because you don't have people who you can't get away from, who have committed to hold you to the highest ethical standard. And you see it. You see how much we avoid that. You don't want people to tell you that you're an authentic, selfish person. That isn't fun, and the typical reaction is to defend ourselves and say, you don't know me, and whatever other thing we want to say. My personal favorite so far is, I was talking to someone about someone else who didn't fulfill their word, and they said, well, I bet they meant it when they said it. This is a classic example of this mealy-mouthed, meaningless ethical code that we hold ourselves to, and our goal has to be to find people who will hold us to that code. Because even though, as far as I can tell, there's nothing that people resist more than getting that feedback, facing it and working with it, there's nothing that helps us more to fulfill our vow than to be asked to be true to our word, to be true to our stated convictions, to our stated promises. There's nothing that helps more. If any of us were to get to the point when we could fulfill our vow, when we had the power to do that, we would have an enormous impact on human history. This isn't just theory. Look at the people who have had the largest impact on human history. This is the group. And all of us are capable of that. Each and every one of us can do that, and can do that in this lifetime. It's possible. Why don't we? The reason is, if you were to get to the point when you had that much power, you would have an enormous impact on human history. And if you know yourself that you lie, you won't give yourself that power because you care about people. And you don't want a person with great power to be a dishonest person. So you yourself will hijack your own spiritual path in order to be sure that you don't realize your vow. Because if you were to realize your vow while still being an inauthentic person, it would be extremely damaging. And so we hold ourselves in cages. We keep ourselves confined. We prevent ourselves from being authentic. Why? Because our actions repeatedly represent to us that my authentic nature, that human nature, as we say, is bad. And we say that, it's human nature. That means people are just fundamentally bad. There's nothing you can do about it. Get on with your life. But the reason we believe that is that we have acted that way. Human nature isn't some kind of immutable force that's totally outside of our power. Human nature is up to us. We can create our human nature, and our decisions do create our human nature. And when we say to someone, I'll do that, and then we don't do it, then yes, sadly, a bad thing happens. They don't trust us anymore. They learn not to trust us anymore. But a worse thing also happens, which is we have now confirmed to ourselves that we can't be trusted. And if we can't be trusted, then we shouldn't have power. And if we shouldn't have power, then we shouldn't be successful in this path, because this path will give us power if we walk it truly. And so we have to do everything we can to prevent what will naturally happen if we stop preventing it, namely that we would achieve awakening and fulfill our vow. That would just happen. That isn't something we have to make happen. You have to prevent it from happening. That's the realization of spirituality, that human nature is not lying and deceiving and being selfish. That human nature is to die. That's why all of us die. We all give everything away because we're fundamentally selfless. And there's nothing any of us can do about it. And yet through constant daily work, we cover that giving, generous, loving, honest nature up with lies. That's what we do. And because we cover it up with lies, we start to believe in that deception. And we stop being even interested in the truth, because our whole life is based on a lie, eventually, until we get to the point when that's just the norm. And we say, incredibly, well, it's human nature. We've come to that conclusion. To come to the point where we can live our vow, first and foremost, we must come to the point when we can keep our word. And as I said, this is hard. I don't think there's anything more helpful I can say to help all of us to get to the point when we can keep our word than saying it's hard. And if you don't think it's hard, then there are only two possibilities. You're either fully enlightened, or you're lying to yourself, even about lying to yourself. Those are the only two possibilities. Because yes, if we realize it, then telling the truth isn't hard at all. But until then, our life is an enacted lie. And it's essential for us to cut it down at its foundation. It's not easy to do that, but the path to that foundation is to start listening to what we're saying, to listen to it and follow through. I want to say one more thing, because there's something that people always bring up at this point. So I'll work with that before we move into the meditation. It's very common to now ask, well, what if you make a commitment that you realize is the wrong thing to do? What if you commit to something, but then later you realize it's a bad thing to do? This is a good question. And it's a question that I think should be answered practically rather than philosophically. I think it's important to answer this practically, meaning what will actually help you the most? What's going to be best for the world practically? Because you can get lost in a philosophical conundrum about this for aeons. Practically speaking, in my experience, one of the most important things that happened in my entire spiritual path was the day when I realized I'm going to do it, even if it's the wrong thing to do. Because there's nothing else that's going to stop me, that's going to prevent me from continually committing to things which I actually already know are the wrong thing to do. Because I started noticing that a part of me, when I made that commitment, already knew that I wouldn't do it, shouldn't do it, couldn't do it. Part of me already knew that. And so I decided, that's it. If I say I'm going to do something, I have to do it. And the best thing that happened because of that was I stopped making so many commitments. Because I realized I'm going to take a real hit. And other people may also take a real hit if I make commitments that I'm not going to fulfill. And I don't want to hurt myself and others. So I'm not going to make those commitments. And that brought me down to earth in a way that, in a specific way, I don't know that I'd say to the greatest extent, but in a specific way that nothing else ever has. I have a number of methods for getting out of those commitments. There are ways that you can do it appropriately, which is to say, if I commit to someone that I'm going to do something and then I realize it's the wrong thing to do, I can go to them under specific circumstances and tell them and try to convince them. I think this is the wrong thing to do. Do you give me permission to do this other thing? But it's theirs. They have that power over me. And I have to let them, I can't take the power back. I gave it away, and I have to assure myself that I will never take it back. They can give it back, but I won't take it back. I can try to convince them to give it back, but I won't take it back. The same thing if I make a commitment to myself. There are very specific ways in which I can change those commitments. Namely, I have to reconsider 3 times under circumstances when I'm not biased, if that makes sense. So it has to be circumstances under which I don't have motivated reasoning. There are certain times when you really care, and other times you don't. So it has to be a time when I don't really care. So if I say I'm not gonna eat sugar for a week, then I can't be looking at the cookies and saying, well, what do you think? Me? Meh, I think it's fine. Okay, let's do that 2 more times and then get on with things. It has to be when I'm already full and I don't actually want to eat anything. And I'm thinking about something that could only happen tomorrow. Under those circumstances, I can say, well, would it really actually be healthy to eat sugar after all? Okay, that was quick. That's not, that was easy. So there are ways of handling it. But if we don't have a clear standard that forces us to sacrifice, that forces us to be true to our word, then we won't have enough trust in ourselves to walk this path. Other people won't trust us enough to become close enough friends to support us in this path. And therefore we'll have no foundation for accomplishing this path. So please try to cut through humanism. Try to pull it out of your mind. The ultimate goal isn't to make yourself feel good. The ultimate goal isn't to listen to your thinking. The deepest goal isn't to have a dream that you achieve. And I myself, I've done all those things. And I know people have done all those things. And honestly, I mean, it's fine. It's not a bad thing to do. You did it. You achieved your dream, and it's good. Good. It's a good use of time. It's not a bad thing to do. But that is it. Once you've done it, you know it's not the point of life. There has to be something more than that. And the way to find it is to expunge those decoys from our minds and base ourselves in something that can take us down this path. And practically speaking, there's nothing more effective than keeping your word. There are, I'll finish with 2 quick stories. There are a number of qualities that a person has in terms of Buddhism that a person has to achieve in order to become a Buddha. And Gautama Buddha, the person we think of as the historical Buddha, the first of these that he achieved was Satyaparamita, which is honesty, truth. And everything else he did was based on that. That was the first thing, so that he could be truthful no matter what. And this is a skill that took him, I don't know how long, but something like 100 gazillion years to become able to do, because it's a skill. It's not just a force. You don't just force yourself into it. You learn how to be honest. It's not easy to do. Don't think it is. Then he was awakened. He became the Buddha 2,500 years ago. And he had a son. And his son became a monk. His son's name was Rahula. And Rahula, when he was 7 or 8 years old, received his first teaching from his father, the Buddha. And the teaching was, be honest. Be honest. Do not tell deliberate lies. And a deliberate lie, if you commit to doing something and then you could do it and you don't, that's a deliberate lie. Be honest with yourself under all circumstances. And he said something, and it's a beautiful exchange between the two of them, which I don't have time for right now. It's really a magnificent exchange. Many of you have heard me talk about this at length. But for now, I will jump to the punchline, jump to the most significant knife in the heart, you know, nail in the coffin of ego. And that is that he said, a person who would tell a deliberate lie, if the circumstances were appropriate, would do any other evil thing. There is no evil that a person wouldn't do if they would tell a deliberate lie. Now, they might not do those things because the circumstances aren't appropriate. Yes? You could say, well, I wouldn't kill anyone. Would you not? Under certain circumstances, you just might. On and on, you can talk about each of them. So what is the core of this? What is the point at which we can finally start to believe that even if I was afraid and someone was telling me to, I still wouldn't kill someone? And that's, some of you may not have thought of this, but that's a very tall order. If you're afraid and someone's telling you to do it, you just might kill someone. We have to accept this deeply. There's plenty of evidence that people do that. And it's hard to find evidence that we wouldn't. So what is that evidence? What's the thing we can believe in? It's that under all circumstances, we're honest. That's the place where the rubber meets the road. That's the place where we're held, anchored in reality, and where a spiritual growth that happens in reality begins. Now, this will be our chance to practice honesty using meditation. And having gained a certain amount of skill in that, it'll be our job to apply it to our lives for the sake of achieving our vow. Remember that this is a skill building exercise. This is a skill building exercise. So this is a time when we're going to build skills. If we find that we have great skills, that doesn't mean that we're finished, because this isn't a time to have skills, it's a time to build skills. If we find that we don't have skills, it's not a time to give up, it's a time to build skills. Because this isn't a time to not have skills, it's a time to build skills. So set aside the question of whether we can do this, and bring up the question of how to cultivate honesty. Pay attention to your experience. Pay attention to your sensory experience. And attempt to repeatedly tell yourself the truth about one simple question. At this moment, are you seeing, hearing, or feeling? Answer that question every few seconds. At this moment, are you seeing or hearing or feeling? If you happen to be thinking, that is either happening in the auditory aspect of your mind or in the visual aspect of your mind. And so even if you're thinking, you can still answer the question of whether you're seeing, hearing, or feeling. You may be listening to chatter in your head, that's hearing. You may be fantasizing about something, seeing pictures or memories, that's seeing. You may have emotional reactions to that, that's feeling. You may feel the chair you're sitting on, that's feeling. You may hear the sounds around you, that's hearing. You may see either the back of your eyelids or the room, if your eyes are open, that's seeing. In any case, answer the question again and again honestly. At this time, are you seeing, hearing, or feeling? Right now, which of those three are you paying attention to? This is a simple exercise. It's very simple. Every few seconds, again, answer the question honestly to yourself. Right now, am I paying attention to what I'm seeing, hearing, or feeling? We're practicing answering honestly again and again. It's an easy question, but that doesn't mean that we're willing to answer it. Answer the question again and again to practice being honest with yourself. Right now, what am I experiencing? Seeing, hearing, or feeling? Whether you're daydreaming or paying attention to your breath, or listening to what's happening around you, in any case, you can still answer this question. And within the context of this exercise, the question can be rephrased as, what is this? And the answer in this context is either seeing, hearing, or feeling. That's what this is. This experience is seeing, or hearing, or feeling. And so we ask the question, and we answer the question. And we do that every few seconds, practicing simple, straightforward honesty. Once again, if you wish, you can ask yourself this question, what is this? That's one way to do this and a useful one. Then immediately following the question, pay attention and discover, are you paying attention to seeing, hearing, or feeling? Then answer the question. You may be thinking something very clever. Fine. Answer is hearing. You may be remembering something in great detail. Fine. The answer is seeing. You may be feeling energetic or tired. Fine. The answer is feeling. Keep it simple and consistent, because this is a time to practice. This is a time to build a skill. I'm going to have an opportunity to continue this practice in motion. In a minute, I'll ring the bell, and then we'll have about 5 minutes to walk inside or outside if we wish, to do some other exercise, or to continue sitting if we'd prefer not to make use of this practice in motion period. Whatever you do, continue the technique. Continue to ask this simple question and to answer it honestly. This is how we build the skill of honesty. Now we'll have the opportunity to increase the challenge level somewhat. Our goal in this next period is to not lie even once. To not lie to ourselves even one time. You can challenge yourself as much as you'd like. Make it as hard as possible to not lie, but don't push yourself too hard. Take this opportunity to commit. At one time, just one time, only one time, you're going to ask yourself the question, what is this? And then answer it, either by saying, seeing, hearing, or feeling. Your commitment is not to answering the question correctly. It can turn out that you were wrong. You can have thought you were feeling, but really you were thinking about feeling, which is actually hearing. That we're not worried about. The commitment is to ask the question and then to answer it. One time. Just one time. Don't make it two. That might be too hard. Just one time. Make the commitment. I'm going to ask this question and then answer it. And if you believe that this is too challenging, if you don't think you can do it, don't make that commitment. Simply continue with the exercise we were just doing. But if you think that one time you can ask that question and then answer it, not even accurately, don't worry too much about that. Just do your best to answer it accurately, but you're not committing to that. Committing to ask it and answer it one time. If you feel that you can make that commitment and follow through, then make that commitment and follow through. Very good. Very good. Wonderful. Take some time now to rest, because I know that may have been exhausting. Holding ourselves to a standard of honesty is often exhausting. So just take a break. You have no commitments now. If you want, you can continue with this exercise, or you can just daydream about something pleasant. Take a nap. Anything's fine. Just for a little while, take a break. Okay, very good. If you'd like, you again can not commit to anything, or you can commit to doing this one time. Or if you'd like to increase the challenge level even more, you can commit to asking yourself that question and then answering it 2 times. I'd recommend that you count on your fingers, because it may be too difficult to count in your head and also maintain this technique. Of course, there's nothing about counting in your head that's against this technique. That's just hearing, but that might feel confusing. So for now, keep it very clear. If you'd like, you can commit to up to 2 times, 0, 1, or 2 times. You can commit to that. If you commit to it, follow through. So now's the time to make no commitment, commit to once or twice, and then follow through. Very good. Now let's take a break again. You have no commitments now. can practice a technique or not. Anything's fine. Just take a little break. There's no problem if this is stressful. It can be. It can be a real sense of urgency. It can feel frightening. So give yourself a chance to relax now. And it's okay if it feels frightening, because the fact is that if you make this commitment, then you're making it no matter what happens. If you ask once, answer, and then discover that the place is on fire, you have committed. It's over now. You must do it again. And that's why it's so frightening, because we're putting ourselves out there when we make a commitment. We don't know what's going to happen. And yet we have to adapt to what happens rather than expecting what happens to adapt to us. And giving up on our commitments if what happens doesn't adapt to us. Instead of that, we put ourselves out there. And so give yourself some time to relax and recover from having made that commitment. All right. Once again, you can not commit to anything. That's fine. If you'd like, you can commit to doing this one time or twice in a row or even 3 times in a row. Once again, I'd recommend that you count on your fingers, that you make a finger counting part of the technique. Each time you ask, you move your thumb along your fingers or something like that, because otherwise it can be very difficult. You want to set yourself up for success. So once again, this is the time. Either don't commit to 1, 2, 3 times in a row asking and then answering this question. Remembering what you're committing to is to ask it and answer it. You may answer it incorrectly. That isn't part of the commitment. Of course, you'll try to answer it correctly, but maybe that's too much. So don't worry about that. Just commit to actually asking it and then answering it 1, 2, or 3 times, or if you'd prefer, don't make any commitment. But if you do make a commitment, then follow through. Now's the time. Very good. Wonderful. And now give yourself a chance to relax a little bit. Very good. And now you'll have the chance, if you wish, to commit to up to 4 times. It's up to you, of course. You don't have to commit. have to make this decision on your own. But once you make this commitment, it's no longer your own. That part of your life has been lost. You gave it away. Don't take it back. Only one way to give it away, and that is to live it away. Your actual life demonstrate that commitment. Once again, you don't have to commit if you'd like to once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Go ahead. Very good. So you have a sense now of how this works. Continue with it. It's up to you how many times you'd like to commit to. We'll continue with this for another 5 minutes. You know how long to take a break. You know how hard to push yourself. Remember, in the next 5 minutes, there's just one goal. Don't lie to yourself. Push yourself as hard as you can without lying. Without lying about this one thing. Are you going to ask the question a certain number of times and answer it? Be very clear with yourself about that and make use of this opportunity to build trust. To build confidence and faith in yourself. The time for discussion, conversation, questions, answers, reports, anything you'd like. Please make good use of the time.
I've noticed that I'm having difficulty breathing.
Mm-hmm. It's reasonable. What did you say? Anything else about that?
Didn't lie to myself.
What?
Didn't lie to myself.
Mm-hmm. You made it. You got through it somehow. Yeah, it's hard.
Would you mind repeating it, because your voice is so low, I couldn't hear it.
I said I didn't lie to myself.
You didn't, what?
Lie to myself.
He made it through the period without making a commitment he didn't keep. Did I say that correctly? Double negative made sense, right? So yes, he did it.
Well, how do we know you just didn't opt out?
He might have opted out. That still counts in this exercise.
It's okay.
That would be fine if you opted out. It's excellent if you opted out. And you know that you succeeded at it. Not taking any risks that way. We certainly shouldn't look down on not making a commitment we can't keep. It's far better to not make it. For example, people will sometimes talk to me about a practice. How a lot of people nowadays who are practicing meditation want to practice more than they do. That's a theme. They would like to sit for an hour a day, but they only sit 10 minutes every 3 days. And a lot of people then ask me, what to do about that? What should I do? And the easiest answer is, of course, is the one that I used, which is you just give up on self-will, give up on self-discipline, because that'll never work, and join a community of people who will get mad at you if you're not in the Zenda. That worked really well for me. I went from more or less never meditating to doing it every day, and I didn't have to try. It took no effort on my part to meditate an average of 8 hours a day for 10 years. There's no effort. On the contrary, it took effort to figure out how to not do that, which I sometimes did. Sometimes pulled that off, found ways of getting out of it, but nonetheless, the average was about 8 hours a day because that's what everyone was doing. So there you are. You're stuck with it. But if that isn't the right answer for you, then typically you want to figure out how can I meditate more. But I actually think that the challenge is how to make the appropriate commitment and follow through. So for example, let's say that you had the choice. Let's make it very simple. Hypothetical in which there's a choice between meditating for, let's say you could commit to yourself. Yes, I commit to myself that I will meditate for an hour in the morning and an hour at night every day. That's one possibility. You could commit to yourself. Another one would be, I commit to meditating 5 minutes a day. Okay? The person who committed to meditating an hour in the morning, an hour at night, let's say that they end up averaging an hour and a half a day, and the other person ended up averaging 5 minutes a day. Yes? I would, without any hesitation, recommend the latter. It's far better to commit to 5 minutes a day and do it than to lie to yourself about 2 hours a day and still do something else. Because that lying to ourselves, that making a commitment to ourselves that we don't follow through on, has a transcendent power. It, in a way that we try to avoid, that we regularly successfully avoid, it eats into our hearts. It debilitates our conscience, and it crushes our roots of goodness. therefore, if someone, not that you did, but if someone were to simply not commit, I would trust them on that. I'd much rather be with someone who didn't say they would be there for me and then weren't there for me than someone who said they would be there for me and then weren't there for me.
I went to level 1.
Good.
Um,
That means you said one time. Good. Great. Good job.
And I'm familiar with an old saying, I judge myself by my intentions while the world's judging me by my actions. Lived a long life of that.
Yeah.
You know, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I got the best of intentions.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to change that.
So you stayed true to your actions. You chose an action that you could follow through on. That's fantastic. It's excellent. It's excellent. And again, it's so interesting, you know, people, if we do this, this kind of practice is where it really happens. This is the real thing here. Because people come in and they say, you know, I can't concentrate very well. I can only concentrate for half an hour. Like, what are you talking about? Come on. You can't concentrate for half an hour. What? You just aren't, your concentration isn't good enough to notice that you got distracted 20 times a minute for the last half an hour. It's to really concentrate, to actually be able to, because to concentrate for half an hour means, if you want to talk about actual concentration, you know, real concentration, actual concentration, the real thing, real concentration.
I know a little about it.
Yes, we know little about it, but I can tell you this. That means that you are able to, let's say you're doing that technique, okay? That means that you're able to ask that question repeatedly for the whole half hour without having a single other thought about anything and immediately accurately answering it every time for a half an hour. That's concentrate. That isn't deep concentration. Okay? That isn't even deep. But it's real concentration. It's actual concentration. It's the real thing. It's like you're really in the shallow part of the ocean. Okay? And no matter what movie you're watching about underwater biology, you're still not really in the ocean at all. You're not really even in the shallow part. But at least you're really in the shallow part there. And that's better. To get to the point when we can actually do that. And to really be able to do that, that means that you can't for a half an hour know that you're doing it. Because that knowledge is a distraction. You can't manage the technique and it has to function anyway without gaps for a half an hour. That's extremely advanced. And this kind of exercise lets us realize, okay, let's do this. We're going to actually do this. And that's where transformation happens. That's where society actually begins to change. Mm-hmm.
Well, I went for the extent that I could on each exercise, and what I noticed is when we did it without the commitment, I had a lot of chatter. And the minute I was really focused on what you were saying to do, everything just went.
Yes.
And it was really enjoyable.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't mention, so I'm glad you bring it up. The kind of enjoyment that you experienced is the most powerful force for changing our world. Nothing is more effective at changing the world for the better than the kind of enjoyment you just experienced. Because, well, for a lot of different reasons, I'll give two. One is that kind of enjoyment can increase enormously. 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 More than it's easy to believe. They say this in the sutras all the time, that I can't tell you because you would go crazy. Yes? You wouldn't believe me. You would start throwing things at me, spitting on me. So, and that isn't good for you. So I'm not going to tell you how good this could get, because you just can't believe it right now. You either go crazy or you'd be angry at me and wouldn't believe it. So I'm just going to set that aside. It can grow dramatically, enormously. And because of that, it can successfully compete with any kind of pleasure that our modern society offers. That we don't do all this crazy stuff because we want to. We do all this crazy stuff because we think we need to. Because in fact, we do need to be happy. Our minds search for pleasure. And so if you don't have another source of pleasure, then that's it. You have to get the kind of pleasure, the best kind of pleasure you can get. But if you have this kind of enjoyment, then you have actual competition in your life for the kinds of pleasure that are unwholesome, unhealthy. Whatever it is, whatever those things are, substances or power dynamics or possessions or whatever it is, this competes with that. So that's a big deal because it grows and grows and grows. But the other point is that if you experience that kind of pleasure and like it, that reformats your sense of who you are. It changes your sense of the kind of person you are. It changes your understanding of what your heart is. Because if your heart is the sort of thing that appreciates that kind of pleasure, then human nature can't be what we thought it was. Because you're not getting any power from it. You're not getting any possession from it. There isn't a way to have that kind of pleasure in a selfish way, which means that you're not selfish. It's a radical shift. It's a radical shift in terms of our understanding of who we are, if we experience that kind of pleasure and value it. But we do value it. So then we have to change our sense of what the human heart is. The human heart is the kind of thing that naturally experiences a form of pleasure that is without conflict. Well, wait, that changes everything. That changes everything. If we're not fundamentally conflict motivated, that changes everything. So for those two reasons, one, because it changes our sense of who we are, and two, because it changes our relationship with the offerings of the world, it's the most powerful agent of change that we have.
It's interesting because I went back to school the last year and a half, and I'm on the very last class now. I have like 4 weeks left, and I felt like it was what I wanted to do. But it was really hard at points. Like I was really ready to give it up. But and in the end, it's not like I really know what the heck I'm going to do with the degree. But it's true. What you're saying is there's just the tremendous joy of the fact that I was committed and I fulfilled that commitment. And yeah, it really does feel like a very deep, profound kind of feeling. Even though the degree itself, I have absolutely no idea why I did it, what's going to happen. Yeah, it's not that. I am clear that it's not that. So anyway, it's just that kind of feeling.
Exactly. And if you do this practice, you can have that experience anytime you sit down. If you commit and really follow through. I wouldn't recommend committing something you're not going to follow through on. But if you commit and follow through, then you get to have the same sense of self-confidence that comes from self-sacrifice every time you do the practice. And in all likelihood, you'll experience a mixture of dread, of fear and dread. This is hard. And also experience the pleasure and relief that you're referring to. And those two forces will play and dance with each other through the practice. Mm-hmm.
Well, I noticed in the beginning, my mind didn't want to answer the question.
Mhm.
And it was going about all these, well, can you perceive two things at the same time? Da, da, da. But I kept hearing you say, just answer the question. And am I going to get it wrong and all that? And then it was actually not hard. But it was really trying to convince me that it was hard. And there were all these thoughts and I couldn't sit through them. And then the act of committing was just simple and fascinating.
Yeah. It's a big deal that you had that experience. It's a big step in the practice. A term for what you're referring to in Sanskrit is papancha. And it's probably the same thing as what the Japanese would mean if they say mozo. Both are terms in the meditative traditions of those cultures. Both papancha and mozo have a very negative sense. And papancha means something like profusion or proliferation, making something more complicated than it is. Mozo is simpler to translate. You can just translate the two characters. It means extraneous thinking, extra conceptualization. That's a very difficult barrier to cut through, and anyone here who's done a lot of practice knows how difficult it is to cut through that. That you cut through it in an hour is excellent. And know that may just keep on coming up, and then you have to cut through it again. It's the thing that we store up as we go through our days, making everything so complicated. And so when we sit down, it's likely that we'll have to move through all of that accumulation. Yes, we accumulated a lot of accumulation. So I'm gonna have to work through it, just dig through it, just as you did. That's exactly how it's done. Most exciting thing is that you committed to it. And you said, I'm gonna get through this now. It's time. And it turns out mysteriously that it's really all that's needed. It's very strange. It seems so real and compelling. Like, how am I going to get through this? It's so much. But it turns out you decide to get through it, and then it's done. You're through it. Making that decision is very hard, and people can go a long time without making that decision. We can go a long time before we finally and really don't buy it. Just don't believe it anymore. Don't believe the whole thing. Say, no, I don't believe this anymore. I believed it. I gave you a chance. I let you run my life for decades, and look at where it got us. This is a disaster. I'm sorry. I let you try. It didn't work. You got to retire now. You're fired. You can't do this anymore. You didn't pull it off. It's time to do something new. Anything will be better. And then we have a faith to give something else a try. So it's amazing that you moved through that. It's really wonderful. Yeah, they say, the nice way they put it in the Theravadan tradition is that there are many, many voices. It's like your mind is filled up with a big committee. Yes? And you can't actually make them leave the room, all the committee members. You don't have that power. You can't make them leave the town hall. You can't make them leave the select board meeting. Okay? But you don't have to give them voting power. You have power over who has voting power. That's all you have. You can't make them leave. They're allowed to come to the meeting and voice their opinion. But you don't have to let them vote on the action we're about to take. Yes? You can choose which voices get that. And ideally, you want to narrow it down to hopefully one. And then you've cut through Mozo and Papancha because it's just one voice, which is the good voice. You have total power. Benevolent dictator, go for it. and then the whole practice changes. So thanks for sharing that. It's a very significant experience. Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how serious you were being when you said if the place caught on fire and you committed to asking the question more times. How you?
Totally seriously.
It seems like one of those examples where you talked about I'm saying, no, that's just stupid.
You can do it. It doesn't stop you from running out of the building.
Okay.
You can still ask the question.
I don't understand.
Whether you ask the question, you just have to ask the question. You do it. Ask the question. I mean, this is the sort of thing that happens in our lives, that we have to be careful about the commitments we make. We want to do it in a way so that we are safe and others are too. And it's our job to make those commitments in that way. Having done that, we have to do our best to stay true to that. And in this case, our best is doing it. Sometimes we'll fail, but we can't include failure as an acceptable option when we're making a commitment. So we say, I'm going to ask this question. The building's on fire. I'm still going to ask the question. I'm going to be able to leave in a way in which I'm still asking that question. But I think the point you make about not understanding is excellent, because it means that you and I are having the same conversation. We're talking about the same thing. It hasn't become mere philosophical speculation, but we know people here, probably most of us or all of us have been in a situation where we made a commitment that actually puts people in danger, maybe ourselves. What do we do at that time? How do we actually handle it? And whatever kind of danger, a lot of different kinds of danger. How do we actually follow through? How do we be true and honest at that time and also be kind and caring? How do we do it? Well, as I say, it's a skill and it's hard to achieve it. And our practice ought to make us increasingly capable of doing that. There are in the religious literature a lot of stories about people who don't go back on their vows, no matter what. And it's easy for us to read it and think, well, maybe that was true in the 16th century or the 4th century BC or whatever. Who knows? Maybe it was true in those places for those people, but it's still a book, and who knows if it really happened, and it doesn't really apply to us. This is real life. And the point of this question and your addition to it is, this is real life. This is it. And this, I know, is a very strict lecture and evening. It's serious. We're coming to the end of this lecture series, and so we're reaching a point in which we're expected to really ask these questions of ourselves. So that's where we're at. But we need to know that every time that we're making a commitment, we're risking our lives. Every time we're making a commitment, we're risking other people's lives. That's the reality. There isn't a way to avoid it. And we here, I think, are mature enough to face that and accept it. We are literally inochigake all the time. Inochigake is a Japanese word that means, it means literally the inochi is life and gake is I believe it means hang. Pretty sure that the character is hang. So your life is hanging, sort of by a thread, or as if you're hanging from the edge of a cliff. That's really where you're at. If you make a commitment, you're putting yourself in that position. That you're risking your life every day. And to be able to face that fact is the most important, in my view, personally. To face that fact is the most important single element of this practice. There's nothing more important than facing the fact that our lives are precious and impactful. And every time that we make a decision, every time we make a commitment, every time we dedicate ourselves to something, real people, maybe including ourselves, real living things, live and die because of it. It always happens that way. There's no time we're free from that level of connection, from that level of urgency. And I know that it's a lot to say for a Sunday evening sit, and so maybe it's too much, but deal with it because it's how it is. The significance of the practice is to get to the point when we can face that. And if we face that, things go very quickly. Transformation happens very quickly. Everything changes at that point. And it may mean that we're a martyr and we die. Things still go fast. But we need to face the fact that we're putting ourselves in that position by making choices. So yes, it's very hard. It's very difficult. It's not, and again, it's not something you can really imagine. You have to have been in that situation to understand how painful, high stakes this particular part of the teaching really is. But it can result, as the Buddha said. He was very clear that imagine the greatest form of sensual pleasure. The greatest kind of sensual pleasure you could imagine. So that means that all day long you get to be around people you agree with and who think you're great, and you get to eat the food you want and have the sexual relations with exactly who you want and read the books that you enjoy and everything. And every room is painted your favorite color, and the music you love the most is always on. Imagine that, how good that would be. That's pretty. Oh, and you don't have to worry about getting sick. Yes, your body's always healthy. On and on. You can just keep on going. Okay? Imagine how good that would be. I mean, think about it. That's pretty good. Yes, the world economy is primarily dedicated to this. Most human activity is dedicated to achieving this. So it must be pretty good. We're not just stupid. It must be awfully good. And he said, the Buddha said that if you took all of that pleasure and added it all together, it wouldn't add up to even 1/16 of the pleasure of living a life you're not ashamed of.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah. Amazon has nothing over the Buddha.
And so this point of this practice is to get us to the point when we can live a life that we're not ashamed of. And that means really risking our lives for it. Thank you all for listening so long, taking it so seriously. This is a time for us to share ways in which we can change our behavior, really do real things that improve our society. Can be anything, of course, anything at all, from be nice to someone to sign a petition or join a movement, help a certain family, anything at all. So why don't you get us started? And then anyone else who'd like to add announcements, please do.
I have put up 3 events so far into the shared document we have. If you're on our email list, it's on the bottom of the email. It's a link that says responsibility events. You click on it and you can add your own events and see what other people have on it. If you're not on our email list, you can sign up on the table outside. So far, Tuesday, there's a monthly meeting of the group showing up for racial justice. That's on Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m. And all the details about where it is and other links to it is on the document. Childcare and snacks available for that event as well.
What was that?
Showing up for racial justice. It's a group of mostly, actually I think it is for white people and how they can get involved in terms of these issues. On Thursday, there is the sequel to Inconvenient Truth. Al Gore has a new movie, An Inconvenient Sequel. And this is hosted by Ben and Jerry's, and they reserved a theater for this. Seems like a really great event, and the film is supposed to really show us what's happening, get us re-engaged in this effort.
When is that?
That is Thursday in Williston, 7 to 8:30 p.m.
Wow. Big theater.
The Majestic 10.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Hosted by VPERG. On Sunday, there's an event at the Fletcher Library. It's called Native Voices, a traveling encampment. I'll read a bit from this. It's there's going to be a Native American teepee, a Bedouin tent, and formal greeting and gathering with a 45-minute program of music and stories. Also a brief historical portrait of the 3 cultures and a conversation between performers and audiences. And the guests seem just really amazing. There's some Native storytellers who were at the Dakota Access Pipeline. There's musicians from Palestine, a Bedouin lawyer and historian, and a Palestinian actor who's a founding member of the Palestinian Laughter Liberation. It seems like a great event. So all details on the document.
Anything else? Mm-hmm.
So the one that I wanted to tell everyone about is actually a case in point of what you did this evening. It's some information came to me this week about an event connected with campaign finance reform that's coming up. And so I decided that before tonight I would commit the information to memory and bring it all to you. And I didn't. But I understand that I can go to the last email I got, go to the bottom, click on responsibility events, put in that information. And I think you're telling me that it will go onto the document and everyone will be able to see it.
Exactly. Thank you for clarifying that.
I just wanted to make sure I had it.
So check soon, right? When will you have it on there?
Well, I'm committed.
Yes.
Before the end of today. And
Great.
everyone will know whether or not I did.
Everyone can know. So why don't you check tomorrow morning? The end of the day means, I suppose,
Or
midnight. Or at midnight if you'd like.
Stay up until midnight.
And then we'll have it confirmed. Plus, we'll be informed. Good. Anything else? One more?
Laboratory B
Yeah,
is still having a fundraiser.
good.
They're 75% of the way there, so
Oh.
they just need a little boost to get across the finish line.
Oh, great.
Nice local hackerspace, really nice people.
Good. All right, it's good to see all of you.
I
Yes,
have something to add.
please.
I just want to let you all know that everyone is welcome to come and visit the CEDAR headquarters in Lowell. Some of you were there just yesterday for the Shinzen Young retreat. We have flyers that are out there with a list of all of our upcoming events and ways to get involved, including our next event, which will be a lovely gathering on Sunday the 13th. And it's just a time to celebrate the community and have some practice and enjoy each other's presence. And you're also welcome to just come, not during our events. You can schedule a visit to spend some time practicing with the Monastic Academy and maybe hang out in a lovely, secluded, personal cabin in the woods and do your own practice. So we'd love to have you out to Lowell, and we welcome you.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
On the 13th.
Yeah.
That's a Sunday, does that mean you won't be here?
It's a very interesting question that I'd love to answer. So I think this plays into our talk. We have committed to do the Sunday sit every Sunday. So we will have the Sunday sit here. However, the number of people at the Sunday sit will be dramatically lower than usual. Most people will be out at Lowell, and yet we will still have one resident here.
Hopefully they'll be alone.
That might just be just them. But one of the main reasons is we've committed to it. And there's people that probably wouldn't hear about the Lowell event that it might fall through the cracks. Maybe they show up looking for the Sunday sit and we're not there. We don't want to abandon them. But we're hoping that most, maybe all people will come out to Lowell and join us for that.
All people.
All people, all friends are welcome. So, but yeah, so that's what's happening.
Thank you. Well, I'm aware that you're leaving on the 15th, so that there's something to be thinking of.
That's right. I'm leaving in the middle of August after 3 months. And the residents will take over everything and do these talks and run the retreats and save the world.
Thank you.
There'll be chanting in here at 7:15. So you're welcome to stick around for that.
So, what will you be doing today?
Number of things I'll be doing.